Hi, I'm Mark Rothman, Progress Coach, and I just love those moments when I see people open up and start living their bigger, better life, the life they were meant to live. We're all controlled by the stories we tell ourselves. Too often, those stories keep us small. They prevent us from living that bigger, better life, the life we really want to live. I've prepared for you a 3-part series to help you rewrite those stories so you can free yourself from them. In part 1, I'll talk about the biggest obstacles to freeing yourself, and then some general strategies you can use immediately. In part 2, I'll talk about the power of context, faith, and gratitude to rewrite your stories. These are 3 of the most important concepts to help you change. In part 3, I'll dig deep on how changing your terms, ownership, and your relationship to money can create even more freedom for you. Along the way, I'll ask you to do a couple of simple journaling projects that can really unlock your progress. Now, are these all the terms and ideas that you're going to help you live the life you want to live? Of course not. But they're a step forward, a huge step forward. And I can tell you from my own experience, when you engage these terms, when you really work them and apply them to your life, these ideas, you will see amazing changes. The analogy I use all the time is, imagine you're on a ship and it's headed to Korea, but it's 1 degree off from where it's supposed to go when it leaves its port. Where is that ship going to end up? Headed for Korea, but it's 1 degree off every day. It's going to end up somewhere else, Tokyo, who knows where, Vladivostok. If you're a golfer, you're going to understand what I mean because your club head only needs to be a little bit off when it strikes the ball to send it in an entirely different direction. That means we can also make 1 degree of change for our own good and watch it add up. That's how quickly change can happen. You just need to make a small step and implement that day to day. And very soon you're going to be in an entirely different place. You'll find a lot in each of the videos here, and I definitely encourage you to watch all 3 parts. Let's get started. Let's start by thinking about all those stories that we tell about ourselves. They're all true, whether we tell a really short version, like at a party when we've just met somebody, or maybe a little bit longer version, we're on a date or we're just introducing ourselves to somebody, or what we'll say in a job application, and those longer stories where once we get to know somebody, we kind of elaborate and we'll talk a little bit more. All of those stories are true, whether we're leaving out certain details or not. We're telling a true version of our lives. But all these stories start with our inner stories. What are we telling ourselves in our head? And in a lot of ways, it's the inner stories that are going to be the ones that are the most powerful and the ones that really control us. And here's the thing, if you really think about it, if you're really honest with yourself, how true are those stories? How often do those stories actually put you in the worst light? How much are those stories you fighting against these inner demons where you're telling yourself how bad you feel about yourself or what you're guilty for or what you did wrong or the mistakes you made? And they may only be a small part of the real picture, right? How many of us are only focused on the negative? We might do 99 out of 100 things right, but that one thing we did wrong is the thing we focus on. Those are the stories that are really controlling us, and those are the stories that are keeping us small. So let's look at some ways that we might be able to change those stories. But even before we do that, let's talk about what do we want to live once we get those stories reframed. Let me talk about what this bigger, better life means. And I want to be very clear. I want to define my terms. When I talk about a better life, I don't mean that your life is anointed, that you're better than the person next to you when you're living your bigger, better life. It's not like you're saying a Ferrari is better than a Volvo. For some people, yeah. For some people, the Volvo is exactly what they need. That's their better car. It's about being better for who you need to be. When I record these videos, it's me living my better life because my higher purpose is to pass on the wisdom and knowledge that I've gained and to support you and to help you be inspired to change your own life. That's better for me. For some people, it's better to sit at a drafting table and create the drawings that become the tall buildings that are behind me. So that's what better means. It's a personal definition. It's your definition. No one else can tell you how to be better. And that brings me to my second point of what this bigger, better life is about. There are 7 billion people on this planet, but there is only one you. There is only one you. When you were born, a space was filled that the universe did not have filled. And when you die, it should be at age 120, and you should live a healthy life, your personal gift to this world will be gone. That is what we mourn. That is the loss that happens when we lose the people we care about. Their space is empty now. Even with 7 billion people, there is no one who can fill that space the way you can. That's what a bigger, better life is. It's fulfilling that space that the universe holds out for us. You can think of that shape in any way you want. It may be in the form of your body if you were to sort of draw a silhouette of yourself. It may be the shape of an amoeba or a rhombus or any of these crazy geometric shapes. But it's your shape. It's your shape. And the bigger, better life is you living within your shape. The other thing I want to talk about is life is a process. Our bigger, better life is a process. You know, when we're kids, adults ask us, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a fireman. I want to be a baseball player. I want to be president. Whatever you want to be. The thing is, you don't just become that and you're frozen in a block of ice. Fireman. No, actually becoming fireman is a process. You go to the fire academy. You learn the skills and tools you need. You build the relationships with other people who want to be firemen and women too. You want to be president of the United States? That's a process as well. It takes decades to build the community and the networks and to campaign and whatever. You want to become a doctor? That's a process. You want to become a secretary? That's a process as well. So life is about becoming. It's becoming who we are meant to be, who we yearn to be from the inside out. And that's a process. We can say we're static. Well, I'm a father of 3 boys. But you know what? Those boys grow up and they start as infants and they become teenagers and now they're young men. So we live in a process world, a world that is always evolving and changing. Yet in our thinking, we get frozen in time. We get stuck in a particular space. We don't give ourselves the benefit of remembering that everything in life is a process. The seasons have a process. We go from spring to summer to fall to winter. We're taught that in what, kindergarten? But we forget and we don't give ourselves the benefit of our own natural process. So part of living the bigger, better life is giving yourself the space to be in process. And in process, we make mistakes. That's part of the process. Ask any scientist. They make mistakes. They do experiments that fail. And that gives them more knowledge. So when we try new things, we feel like we have to get it right the first time. But if we're living in process, we have a bigger vision of ourselves. We expand our margins a little bit and we can evolve. And we say, okay, that didn't go right. Boy, that was the wrong thing to say to my wife. Maybe next time I can say something different and it'll work out better. And then I have another opportunity and I do try something new. And most of the time it works because I'm changing, I'm aware and I'm changing. I'm really excited for you to go on to the next segment because it talks about how you can increase your contribution to the world just by changing your inner stories. In the bigger, better life, we are fulfilling the obligation we have to the world. Yeah, that's right. We have an obligation. If you're still living small, if you're still controlled by those stories in your head, if you're still waiting for your liberation day, you are denying the world the special gifts that only you can provide, that you were born to give. That when you were born, the 7 billion other people in the world kind of made space for you to come in and give your particular contribution. We are obligated. The world wants us to do that. It's begging for us. It's asking for us. Because look around. This is a very wounded world. It's a broken world. And we may feel broken inside and we may feel small inside. But the universe wants us to step beyond that and say, use your brokenness to heal others. Use your smallness to help liberate others. Step out of your smallness to be the bigger, better person you were meant to be. Now you're meeting your obligation back to the world, and you're going to create changes that you will never understand. I want to tell you a story that happened to me. I had a world of problems: work, family. I was trying to run a marathon and I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. I was just starting out to like mile and a half training. So one morning, it was super early, it was dark, it was foggy, and there was fog everywhere. And I was kind of doing like an early morning run, and all these problems were in my head. And I heard a voice out of the fog, a woman singing, "What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Whoa, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding?" That's an old Elvis Costello song. It's probably 40 years old. I remember it from when I was in high school. But it's a beautiful song. It's a song about how the world is broken, but we can still cling to and hope for a vision of the world that's beautiful, that we can work towards, that we can be inspired towards. And when I heard that song, it filled me with calmness. And a voice spoke to me. It was my own thoughts, but I don't know where they came from, because it wasn't what I was thinking before I heard that song. And it said, "Mark, everything's going to be okay. You're going to figure out whether you can run the marathon, and whether you can or can't, it's going to be okay. And your work's going to work out, and your family's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay." And then I heard the lady still singing at the top of her lungs, kind of fading out like she was running in a different direction from me. And I realized she'd never seen me. She never knew I was there. And more importantly, she never knew and will never know how much her song inspired me and changed my life, gave me hope at a moment when I felt broken. Every minute you have the opportunity to be that angel, hidden, but changing another person. That's the obligation the world asks of us, to find those opportunities where we reach out and do something that we don't even know the result of, but it makes a difference in another person's life. So when we stay small, stuck in our heads, listening to that story of the 1% we screwed up on rather than the 99% we hit it out of the park on, we're denying that voice. We're denying that song to the world. The next segment talks about some quick tips you can use to avoid being short-circuited by old habits that keep you playing small. One of the first things we do is we slow down. Somebody once told me, the slower you go, the faster you get there. It's crazy, right? The slower you go, the faster you get there. But so much of our life is hurry up, get there sooner. What's the shortcut? Get me there now. We got to slow down. We've really got to be conscious of what we're doing and what we're doing to ourselves. So when we talk about these terms, like context, faith, gratitude, the word terms itself, or ownership, or we take our relationship with money, we short-circuit any kind of real engagement with these ideas too often. So I'm going to ask you to be specific. I'm going to ask you to not overgeneralize. I'm going to introduce you to new understandings of these words and these terms. The other thing I'm going to do is help you overcome one of the biggest challenges to change, and that's the fear of making a mistake. Even as I write a book, Stop Playing Small, an A to Z guide to living your bigger, better life, I'm still a human being. I can explain these ideas and I can aspire to and work towards living them, but I make mistakes too, just like you do and just like you will. So part of the obstacle to change, part of what's getting in our way, is the idea that if we don't get it right the first time, well then what's the point of doing it? No, the opposite. Remember what I said before. Life is a process. Changing ourselves is a process. So give ourselves a break. Slow ourselves down. Give ourselves some breathing space. Let ourselves make mistakes, because the truth is 99 out of 100 times we actually get it right. Most of the time we're getting a lot right in our life. And of course, our little monkey minds are not giving us credit for that. So if we're going to slow it down and be critical with ourselves, it's only fair to slow it down and be honest with ourselves. And let's look at where we're getting it right, where we're doing the right thing, we're being the person we want to be. And I guarantee it's far more common in your life than you think it is. Because again, we're only focusing on that 1%, that one mistake, or those times we screwed up. We're not hearing or seeing those times where we did it right. So that's going to be a big part of stepping into the bigger, better life. That's a big part of realizing your Liberation Day, is to give yourself space for all these new ideas and new challenges. Now that you've learned about how important it is to slow down and give yourself a break, go on to the next segment and discover the power of community so that you're not doing this alone. And the last thing to think about is that nothing happens in a vacuum. You can't do this alone. You need to be part of a community. You need to have a voice, a trusted friend, a mentor. Wherever the energy or the wisdom is coming from, you've got to be open to that wisdom. That's why I love to get comments from viewers. Give me your truth. Tell me what's going on with you. Let's discuss, let's be in relationship, because we can't do this alone. There's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a team. So if your liberation feels like a far away event, you need a bigger team to get there. So reach out, build that team, find people you trust. Be in touch with me or other sources and other voices that you can be part of. Build your own community. You can't do it alone. Build your community. We talked about your inner stories that keep you playing small. We asked you to set your liberation date. We asked you to think about your bigger, better life, the life for you and for the world. We talked about the power of slowing down, not assuming you understand everything, but letting you see things in a new way, and how powerful it can be when you give yourself a break. And last but certainly not least, we talked about don't go it alone. Build your community. This is a contact sport. We can't do it alone. I hope you found ways to approach your life, context to understand them, to approach things from a new attitude. Just by shifting your attitude a little bit, you're going to see really powerful change. But go ahead, go onto the project gallery and tell me your stories. Ask questions. I'll do my best to come back and give you an answer. But most important, that's a great way for you to build your community. Start with your Skillshare community. And go ahead and look for my next video, The Power of Context, Faith, and Gratitude to Rewrite Our Stories. Because that'll give you some real clear and tangible things you can do to take yourself to the next level. Welcome to my second video in the series of how to rewrite those stories that keep you playing small. In the first episode, Freeing Yourself to Live Your Bigger, Better Life, we talked about what it looks like to live your bigger and better life, and I gave you some basic tools that you can use in your day-to-day life to actually enact your day of liberation. So if you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check it out. And also, you might want to check out my third video in this series, how our terms, ownership, and relationship to money need to change so that we can live that day of liberation we deserve. So go ahead and watch this video and feel free to check out any of the others I've talked about. Before we get into the actual terms of context, faith, and gratitude, I want to remind you of some basic ideas that are critical to being able to rewrite those stories that keep us playing small. And it's something we're going to focus on in this video as well. And that's the idea of being specific, of being really clear about the terms that we're using. You know, we use terms that we've understood for our entire lives. And that means that the older we get, the more we're kind of working in the same terms, the way like a groove just keeps wearing itself out, you know? So we want to change that groove, and sometimes we can do it by taking those old terms and giving them new meanings. A second thing we need to do is kind of slow down in our understanding of a word. And what that means is not running to our automatic understanding, but rethinking it and looking at what the limits of our understanding are, and also looking at what those terms are not. And those can really help us find new power in ideas that we may have been using or think we've been using for our entire lives. Don't stop me if you've heard this. A new farmhand shows up at the farm. And the old farmhands think they're going to have a little fun with this guy, so they hand him a shovel and they send him to the barn. When he gets there, there's nothing but manure. And he's thrilled. He shovels all morning, works through his coffee break. He works through lunch. He is shoveling crap like you've never seen before. And at the end of the day, he's not discouraged. He's thrilled. And the old farmhands come up to him and they say, dude, how can you have so much fun shoveling crap? And he says, hey, with all this manure around, there's got to be a pony here somewhere. So that's a guy who had a special context. He saw the barn of manure not for the manure, but for what might be underneath it. He saw the opportunity in the challenge. There's another story I like to tell about David and Goliath. David of the Bible was a kid, really, and Goliath was like this big, like He-Man, like the Hulk, covered in armor. And all the soldiers in David's army were terrified because they knew this Goliath was just going to destroy them. So they sent David out there. And David was a shepherd, and all he had was a slingshot. But he was a really good shot. David realized there was an opportunity in how he could fight Goliath. He wasn't weak because he couldn't be as big as Goliath like the Hulk, and he couldn't put on the chainmail and come at him with a mace and who knows whatever weapons he used. All he had was that little slingshot. But he saw that if he could get the shot through the eye mask, he might have a chance of knocking Goliath out of the game. And that's exactly what he did. He saw his limitations, his size, the fact that he wasn't a warrior like Goliath, he wasn't a big hulky guy, actually as an opportunity, because he came at Goliath from an angle the monster never expected. And I want to give you a third example from my own life. There was a period of time when my kids were in elementary school where my wife and I would trade off making lunches. Ultimately, we changed this because my kids hated my lunches. I could never remember who wanted what, whatever. But on the mornings I made lunches, I would get furious with my wife because I could never find the stupid baggies that the sandwiches had to go into because she always left them wherever she finished using them. So if she'd used them the day before and left them on the counter, they were on the counter. Now, I would always go back to the cabinet because in my mind, you put the baggies back in the cabinet. And after about 3 weeks of this, I called up a friend of mine and I told him I was about to go off on my wife. And you can imagine what I was going to say, but it's like, can you put the effing baggies back in the cabinet? And my friend said, take a breath, Mark. Who does all the shopping for the food you put in the baggies? Who tells you what the meal plan is for each day? Who helps you get the kids out the door? Maybe she's getting them dressed while you're doing the lunches. You really want to go at this person with guns blazing? Maybe you need to adjust and stop looking for the baggies in the damn cabinet and figure out you got to follow your wife's system, even though it looks like no system to you. Now that was a great friend because he saved me from hurting my wife, from coming off like an asshole, from creating a huge fight. You can imagine what would have happened. It was about adjusting myself to the reality around me. That was a new context I hadn't thought of before. So that's what context can do for us. It can help us frame a problem or frame a situation in a new way. In the next segment, you'll discover you can't make this change alone. So the question is, how do we get to a new context? How do we learn to look at things from a different perspective? Well, one powerful technique that I discovered is to phone a friend. You can't do this work alone. You can't stop playing small by staying small yourself in your own little cocoon. That's a big way to stay small, is to isolate. And there's a saying, your mind is a dangerous place to go alone. So have a community, reach out, Sometimes it's a book, sometimes it's calling a friend. It may be going to a meeting or having a therapist. But it's about getting outside your own head. I think we have to acknowledge that in order to get help, we need help. And that may be a huge obstacle to overcome in changing our context. Because if we stay narrow and rigid, we don't have to admit to anybody we don't have all the answers. We don't know how to do anything. We need help ourselves. We don't have to say, I'm vulnerable. I'm weak here. I need help. The analogy I love to talk about is, would you ever try moving your car by picking it up? Of course not. You use your keys, you turn on the motor, you move the car. And if the car won't start, the only way you're going to move the car is with help. You're going to call a tow truck, or you're going to get some friends to help you push it, right? You can't pick up a car by yourself. That's what happens when we're refusing to ask for help. We're refusing to admit our weaknesses. We're terrified of the vulnerability of saying, I can't do it alone. But you know what the truth is? The minute you stop trying to do it alone, you're starting to change your context. Like in the first point, you're reaching out to your community. So admit your fear of being vulnerable, because we can't get over what we don't admit exists. And then a third point to talk about before you can change your context is, are you really ready for it to change? Is there some possibility that you like staying stuck? You like being small? Because here's the thing, change is scary. Change means admitting there is a reality you can't predict. It means taking a risk of living in a different way. That's what changing your context means, right? To look at something or do something a little differently. The problem with it is we're really comfortable in the way our life is. We may not like it. We may not be happy. We may hate our job, hate our boss, hate our apartment, hate our landlord. But each of the things we would have to do to change are scarier than the discomfort we're living in. I'd have to move. And that brings up a whole bunch of scary questions. Can I afford it? Will I find something similar? Who will help me move? I've got so much crap. I've been here so long. I like my neighbors. Who knows what it is? But there's always an excuse to stay where you are. The same thing with a job. You may be so terrified that you're not going to find another job, that you're not going to be wanted by anybody else, that you're staying stuck where you are. And you got to ask yourself, if you're actually getting something out of staying stuck. Do you love to complain to your friends about your boss or your apartment? That's the challenge. You've got to be honest with yourself about what's keeping you stuck. Is your bigger fear not that you're inadequate, but that you're actually powerful beyond your understanding? That's not my idea. It's an idea that comes to us from Marianne Williamson. And it's a very powerful idea, because it means that if we're truly afraid of who we can be, who we should be, of what that bigger, better life might look like, we've got to ask ourselves, what are we really afraid of? And I think that's accountability. That's looking ourselves in the mirror and saying, the only reason I'm not living that bigger, better life is because of me. I'm the one stopping me. And that accountability, that self-reflexivity may just be too terrifying to face. This brings me back to my first point of why we can't do this work alone. We need someone to support us, something to give us strength and vision, and that reminds us of where we want to be when the going gets tough, because the going will get tough. And we can't do this alone, but we can do it with the help of a friend. That's the key. That's one of the ways to change our context, is let's get honest with ourselves about why we're not changing in the first place. I think what I say next about faith will surprise you. The second term we want to talk about is faith. And faith is one of those ideas that we really need to slow down on. Remember when I was talking before about we have to understand an idea in its specificity? We have to be very clear on the term itself. Faith is one of those words because it comes to us so loaded from how we grew up religiously or how we didn't grow up religiously or what the media images of religion are or what we read in a book. There's a lot of ideas that come to us. That's why we've got to be really clear and specific about what we understand as faith. And I want to propose two ideas to think about faith. The first idea is to look at those incidents in your life where you really demonstrate faith. I love talking to people who say they have no faith, they don't have a relationship with God, they're atheists. That's fine. That's fine. But I'm going to say, even so, I can show you you still have faith. So I'm going to ask that person, have you ever waited for a bus? Have you ever started your car? Have you ever gone to the grocery store looking for milk? Would you believe that each of those are acts of faith? Think about it. You're sitting on the bus bench, la-di-da, where's the bus? When's it going to come? Even if you have a bus schedule and you know the bus is supposed to come in 2 minutes, you have no guarantee it's going to get there. You are sitting there on the faith that the bus will come. It didn't break down a mile away. You didn't have the wrong schedule and now it's 15 minutes off. You're sitting there as an act of faith that the bus is going to come around the corner and you're going to be able to get on. Same thing with our car. Every time you start that car, it's an act of faith that it'll start. Just because it started 100 out of 100 times before doesn't guarantee it's going to start 101 times. We've all had cars that don't start. And things happen at the grocery store. Power outages render entire milk cases useless. So the milk spoils. It's happened. You show up at the grocery store and they don't have milk for no reason you could have foretold. But you're going into that store with faith that the milk is going to be there. Those two are acts of faith. And I think when we break faith down and make it really small, it can become a really powerful idea. Because we start to see the faith we have in our daily life, particularly when we're feeling faithless. And then the second thing I want to talk about when I talk about faith is that it's a process. It's not frozen in time. We often think about, in our old understanding, that faith it's like frozen in time, like in amber, or it's ice. It's just faith. I have faith or I don't have faith. Well, what if we think about faith as a process where we're coming to faith, where we're practicing our faith, where we may not have as much faith today as we'll have tomorrow. We may not be as aware of those moments in our lives where we're demonstrating faith today as we could be tomorrow if we start looking for them. So I get to have faith in a process of moving forward, rather than just saying, I've got it, I don't have it. It exists this way or it doesn't exist this way. I get to have a relationship with an idea. You can't have a relationship with a statue. It's just there, it's on your mantle, on your piano, on the side of your bed, look, that's a statue. But when you have a relationship with something, it's evolving and it's changing and it's growing. So I'm asking you to think about faith as a process. Next, I'll talk about how powerful gratitude can be. The third concept I want to talk about is the concept of gratitude. Now let's look at gratitude closely. It begins with the 7th letter of the alphabet. So if we were to rank the alphabet in order, it's the 7th letter in the alphabet. And if the alphabet were ordered in a hierarchy, you might think that the A words are the most important, and then the B, and then the C's. So that would make gratitude the 7th most important word in the dictionary. But the truth is, we might want to start spelling gratitude with a silent A at the beginning of the word, because that would put it up at the top of the alphabet. Because I don't think you can have any kind of growth without gratitude. Here's an experiment I want you to try. Take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle of it. On the left side, write all of the angry and bad and hurtful feelings you have. You're angry, you're sad, you're frustrated, you're disappointed, whatever those feelings are. Then in the second column, write that same term and then plus gratitude. So you have sadness plus gratitude. You have anger plus gratitude. You have frustration plus gratitude. And then think about those things that are making you angry or sad or frustrated. And ask yourself, is there gratitude in those things? When I lost my mother, when she passed away, I was sad. But I had gratitude for what she gave me in my life. When someone broke up with me in college, I was heartbroken. And she actually said to me, I think anytime someone breaks up with you, you should write them a thank you note. Because they're seeing a limitation in the relationship that is holding you back. And she was right. Because of that relationship, I learned a lot about myself that help me form better relationships later. Every relationship can be a little bit of a practice for the next one. And that's what I found there. So I'm very grateful to her for the education I got about myself, but also for this idea that's very powerful. Fear plus gratitude. Because if we're afraid of something, like the opportunity to change, there's also gratitude in it because it means there's something for us when we overcome that fear. How powerful do we feel when we've done something we were scared of? There's an opportunity. So there's gratitude we can add to our fears, our anger, our sadness, whatever we're feeling. And the last idea to talk about gratitude is the paradox that when we express gratitude, it actually changes us. When we express gratitude outwards, it actually has an impact back on us. Like that moment when I wrote the gratitude list when I was at the bottom of a hole. It changed me. I expressed gratitude out just by thanking myself for having these stupid things like a pencil and a piece of paper, but it got me out of that hole. It allowed me to take the next step. So when we express gratitude, either in looking at some of those things that have hurt us, like our fears and our sadness, and saying, well, where is the gratitude that's possible in that? Or we've made a gratitude list to sort of see outside of ourselves the things that we can be grateful for. Or we work on changing our mental mind, our mental approach, so that we're projecting gratitude outwards. All of these things still have a boomerang effect back on us. Go ahead and upload your gratitude thoughts to the project gallery, and then in the next segment, we'll put together context, faith, and gratitude. Let's put it all together now and see how we can use context, faith, and gratitude to change those inner stories that keep us small. Remember, the problem that we have with those inner stories is they always put ourselves in the worst light. We always focus on the 1% we didn't do, or the one mistake, or the one fly in the ointment, whatever wasn't perfect, right? That's the problem with these stories. We obsess about what we did wrong, the mistakes we made, what we're doing over and over again to keep ourselves stuck. That's the problem with these stories. So if we approach these stories with context, faith, and gratitude, we can actually start to rewrite them. We can become the editors of our own stories. Let's apply these ideas to a common story many of us hold. I never finish what I start. So let's say that's your pattern, and you continually beat yourself up on it. Why should I start something new? I'll never finish it. I get distracted, I'll move on to project to project to project. I'm hopeless. Well, what's a new context? That's your Goliath. I never finish what I start, but what's your David approach? What's your little slingshot? Well, you actually have a pretty varied mind. You're interested in a lot of ideas. You're really good at getting started. Those are some really powerful skills. So then you can ask yourself, what's the problem? Why do I not hit the mark when I throw my little slingshot and finish the project? Well, maybe that's where faith comes in. Maybe you have no faith that you're actually capable of finishing the job. Maybe you're terrified of what it would mean to finish. That the terror of finishing and having something clean and complete in your psyche is so scary, you're more comfortable having this project open in your mind and knowing it's always there. You've always got something to come back to. You're not alone without an idea or a project. They're almost like your friends. Well, what if you could say, faith is a process, and for today I'm going to have the faith that if I finish this project, I'm actually going to find another one to do. I'll have new friends. Or you have faith that I may not be able to finish the project, but today I'm going to do what I can, and I'm going to have the faith that it's going to bring me to the next step. It's like waiting for the bus. I may not get on that bus, but I can wait at the bus bench and hope it's going to come. So whatever that looks like, you can take that step. And the last part is gratitude. Because you have the skills to start. You have the skills to think of the idea. You even have the skills, I'll bet, to know what you need to do to finish it. So you can be grateful for all that. And you can be grateful that you can try a new skill like faith and to actually change your context. See how they're all fitting together now? You can use your skills of gratitude and faith and context. You have to actually give yourself a chance to finish the project. And maybe the first time you do it isn't a big project. It's just something simple. One thing that you've been stuck on for a while. Maybe it's cleaning off a shelf in your closet, not even a drawer, just a shelf. But you have the faith that you can finish it because you know you can. Let's look now at a common story keeping us small: compare and despair. What if your story is what I call compare and despair? All you can do is look around you and see what everyone else has, but what you don't have. I'm not going to look outside my window to look at the car next to me, the nicer car or the prettier wife or better boyfriend. I'm just going to look at my life. I'm going to dial it back to just look at my race. And I'm going to work on staying in my lane and running my life. Now that's not easy to do. If it were easy to do, we'd all be doing it, right? But we can add in faith. And we can say, I have faith that I can just look at my own life. And I can see that as a process, that it's going to take day by day a little bit of work to just remind myself to look at my own life. And of course, gratitude is a huge part of that, because that gives us an opportunity to see what we do have in our lives. Yeah, maybe we don't have the Lamborghini, but we can be grateful for the car that we have when it gets us from place to place, because that's really all we need today. We can be grateful for those things we do have, which helps us focus back on what is inside our car, what's inside our window, gets us away from that context of compare and despair where we're looking around at everybody around us. Next up, how often do we tell ourselves the victim story? The last story that's super powerful for tons of people is the victim story. In the victim story, everything happens to us. We're at the end of the chain of all kinds of events. It's everyone else's fault for our feelings. So what's the context change that we've got to do for the victim story? The opposite of being a victim is being the actor, being the one in charge. Now, we may not be able to change big parts of our life today, but we can look around and say, where's one place I don't want to be the victim anymore? I want to take action. And what's the baby step we can take to take action? Now that is in itself an act of faith. Just because I can't see the bus coming, I'm going to expect and hope for the bus to be here, and I'll wait on this bus bench. I can't see that my action today is necessarily going to take me out of being the victim, but I can take that step anyway. I can give it a shot. I can remember that faith is a process. And by the way, the minute we change our context from victim to action, we are in action. We don't necessarily even have to do the act to feel the power that comes from changing our mind. Now, we do need to do the act that's going to take care of ourselves, but just that mental shift is tremendously empowering. And then the last part of shifting out of victim mode and into action mode is being grateful. Grateful for what you do have power over. And in that situation where you feel like the victim and you want to change it, what can you be grateful for that's an opportunity to help you change it? So another way to respond to that with gratitude is to follow the expression, when you're in the basement, scrub the floor. What's around you in your immediate area that you can improve? Because that's already taking action. That's already having faith that you can change your life, that you can make things better. So when you're in that place, fully victimized, in the basement, what's the floor right in front of you that you can scrub? What's a step you can take that will give you a sense of your own power? And then how can you take that a step further to actually change your victimhood into action? Lastly, like I said earlier, you can't do this alone. Let's be in a community. Be in touch. Comment on this video. Check out my website, markcoach.net. Email me. Let's talk about the stories that are holding you back, the stories that are keeping you small? And what are the ways that you can attack them so you can start living that bigger, better life? Go ahead and check out the first part of this series, Freeing Yourself to Live Your Bigger, Better Life. And I hope you go on and view the third video in this series, How to Change Our Terms, Ownership, and Relationship to Money so you can start living your bigger, better life. Check me out on Instagram at Mark Progress Coach and be in touch. This video, How to Change Our Terms, Ownership, and Relationship to Money, is the third in a series intended to help you master 6 tools that can liberate you from the stories that keep you playing small. I go into this in a lot more detail in Module 1, Freeing Yourself to Live Your Bigger, Better Life, and in Module 2, The Power of Context, Faith, and Gratitude to Rewrite Our Stories. So I definitely encourage you to go back, check them out. But you can also stay right here, right now, and let me give you a brief summary of what we've already talked about. All of us have these stories that keep us playing small. We tell ourselves that we'll never be enough, whatever we do won't succeed, we're constant procrastinators, always getting stuck in our own way. Whatever the story is. Someone else always has it better or easier than we do. You know what your story is. And the truth is, it's exactly these stories that keep us small. It's almost like we use these stories the way we might use an old comfortable shoe. It feels really good to put it on, even though it's worn out and it's not really serving us. So the question that I asked in those earlier videos is, what's your pain point? At what point do you want to stop using this old shoe, these old stories that are not serving you, so that you can really live the life you were meant to live? Until you're really clear that you're at your pain point, that you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, that you don't want to live small, limited, and constrained anymore, you're really not going to change. Because the problem with change is that we're flying into a future that we don't know. The nice thing about the world we're in, even if it's not serving us, even if we feel defeated or anxious or even depressed, at least it's familiar. But to let go of that world is kind of like a trapeze artist letting herself fly into the air. We hope there's going to be someone to catch us, but we have no idea what that world will be like. We have to risk that feeling of we don't know what's coming in order to change. So I ask you to look at your pain point, determine that you're sick and tired of living in it, and that you're ready to change right now. The first term I want to focus on in this video that will help us stop playing small and instead live that bigger, better life we were meant to live is terms. Show me a person who doesn't set her terms, and I'll show you a person who has no control over her life. I'm worried that if I set terms, you're going to be displeased with me. If I tell you I'm going to be home at 6 p.m., I'm going to be worried that you wanted me to be home earlier. Or that if you told me you wanted me to be home earlier and I couldn't, you're going to be unhappy. Rather than just deal with the honesty of the situation and let me accept your displeasure as yours. I don't have to own that. If I have to stay at work until 6, it's what I have to do. The problem is that when we fudge or negotiate and we're not honest, that gets us into even more trouble. Maybe we say, you know what, honey, I can be home at 5:30. And then we don't come back until 6 or 6:15. Well, of course the person's going to be displeased with us because we actually didn't even do what we said we were going to do, regardless of whether it was what we really could do. How many times do we get ourselves into trouble like that? Like we'll say we'll be somewhere at a certain time, and then we're late. We'll say we'll do something, and then we don't follow through. It's because we haven't set our terms. We haven't said, you know what? You may want me to do that thing, but the truth is, I can't do it. Only when we set our terms, draw our line in the sand, can we start to have some personal power. And the interesting thing that happens when we do set those terms, as much as people might be displeased at first, when they see we're holding to those terms, we actually have a stronger relationship. Having our terms can actually bring more love into our relationships because now people know what they can expect of us. There's no wiggling, there's no gray area. We say we're going to be home at 6 and we hold that term. Now I'm dependable. Now I'm reliable. I'm remarkable. And that remarkability creates greater trust and greater opportunity for connection and love. So think about those relationships that are really messed up in your life. It's because there are no clear terms. What would happen if you set the terms? And then you were strong enough to stand there and say, I know that might displease you, but I'm telling you what I can do, honestly and sincerely, because I don't want to disappoint you anymore. I don't want to live in the gray. I want to live in a relationship of greater trust, reliability, and remarkability. The other thing that happens when we stand for our terms in our relationships is that we're not only standing for ourselves, but we're standing for the other person. When we violate our terms because we want to please the other person, we're actually holding a little bit of an invoice back against that other person. We're holding on to a little bit of anger or resentment, which we may say is, well, this is the price of being in a relationship, a little bit of give and take. But the problem is, if we really have violated our terms, if we've done something we really didn't want to do, we expect that invoice to get paid someday. And we're holding it over the other person. And that may come out in demanding, in being resentful, in playing the victim, because only when we play the victim can we get the other person to give us something we need in return. We get to blame the other person. How much do you think that this blame and this victimhood and this resentment and the anger contributes to problems in a relationship? So if at first we said, I'm sorry, I can't do that, yeah, we risk the other person being displeased. But we also create the opportunity to say to that person, but this is what I can do. Would that help? Is that enough? And now we can have a relationship based on the truth of what we're able to do and what we're willing to do. And we're also ready to let that person stand on his or her own 2 feet. That person can be their own adult. If there's something we can't do, we can let the other person make up the difference and have that self-esteem that comes from taking care of themselves. How many times are we violating our terms as a way to please someone else, and we end up doing for someone else what they could do for themselves? Sometimes there's no greater gift we can give for people than to let them do for themselves what they can do for themselves. But there's an even bigger payoff when we set our terms. And that is, we admit to the world we are worth having terms. Because when we don't set our terms, we are unavoidably saying to the world, my needs are not as important as yours. We can only do that regularly if we actually really believe our needs are not as important as yours. But once we start admitting, because this is the truth, we may not feel it, but feelings aren't facts. The truth is, we are worth setting terms for. And once we start setting terms, we are admitting that worth to ourselves and to the other person. And when we're able to hold those terms, regardless of how anyone else reacts, we are standing for ourselves. We are standing for our own self-worth. So when we can set these terms, we are taking another step towards our liberation from living in that small, constrained, limited life. And in that freedom, we can start living our bigger, better lives. Now, how do we start setting terms? We start setting them small. Baby steps. What's a small term you can set today? And then you can practice holding that term, because it will take practice. And once we start setting terms, we're going to get challenged by other people. Not only are we setting the dynamic, we're upsetting the apple cart of a relationship, but people want to make sure that we really mean what we say. So they're going to kind of poke and test our terms. So we're going to have to hold them in the beginning more strongly than ever. So what's a small term you can set for yourself, a baby step that will help you move forward? Set that term and then practice holding it, and watch how it starts opening up your sense of power for yourself, how it starts cleansing your relationships of those invoices that are under the surface but you expect to be paid. Look at how even this baby set of setting terms helps you live a bigger, better life. The next idea that can help free us to live that bigger, better life is ownership. Now, what does ownership mean? Let me give you an example. Online shopping could not exist without free returns because it gives us the opportunity to get the item, take a look at it, hold it in our hands, see if it's going to work for us. It removes the risk of buying something we're really not sure about because we can't really confirm that it's the thing we need, and then we can send it back. But how many times have we bought something on a free return policy, 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, it never seems to be enough time. And on the 31st day, we're like, holy crap, I've still got that thing, now I can't return it, right? How many times has that happened? It happens because we never really had ownership of that item. We never really took it seriously as part of our lives. We kind of put it on a shelf and we said, okay, we'll deal with it. Well, it never got dealt with until it was too late. So how many things in our lives are we treating like online shopping with free return that we don't really own it? What would have happened to own that item the minute it came in our house? We would have made a decision, we would have gotten it returned. We might have put in our calendar, okay, return item by day 13, so it's not day 14. That's what an owner does. So where in our lives are we not taking ownership? We're kind of sliding under the radar. We do it in physical spaces. How many spaces in our homes are just a mess, just chaos? Those are physical areas that are not owned. And how much ownership are we showing in our relationships, in our jobs? Do we own our time? Are we one of the people who's always rushing in 2 minutes after the meeting starts? We're not late because the meeting really hasn't started because, by the way, there's this kind of like groupthink lack of ownership. What would happen if you really owned your time and you said to yourself, I'm going to get to that meeting 5 minutes early or even 10 minutes early? I've set a policy that I like arriving places 15 minutes early. And that gives me time to just sit in my car or wait in the room while everyone else is assembling and just relax and think and be myself. Because that's what ownership of my time looks like. As with terms, when we become owners in our lives, we don't just become better for ourselves. We become better for everybody that we're involved with. Our girlfriends, our boyfriends, people we love, our children if we have children, even our parents, our friends, because we're really taking responsibility for our own lives. We're telling the truth about who we are and what we can do. Now, this sounds like a tall order. I understand that. But again, like everything, it starts with baby steps. What's one thing you can take ownership of? Maybe it is cleaning out a shelf or a drawer in your apartment or your house. Maybe it is setting a policy that when you buy something online, you're going to return it within 5 days, no matter what. The return policy could be 6 months. Some places do have infinite return policies. You can return it anytime. But still, your term is going to be 5 days. That's using your terms to become an owner of what comes into your house and how you're going to handle those things. What are the other things in your life that need ownership? Is there a lack of ownership at your job? Is there a lack of ownership in your relationships? Now, these get harder, but with baby steps, and as always, with a trusted partner, a mentor, a coach, a confidant, a book or a video that gives you new information, you can start making changes in even these bigger, challenging areas as well. But it all comes with a baby step of what's the first thing you can do today to become an owner, even in a very small area of your life. Feel what that feels like, gain the power that comes out of it, and then go ahead and apply it somewhere else. Because if we've done it once, we can do it again. Procrastination is a great example of not owning. Because when we procrastinate, we always have a back door. The project wasn't completed to our specifications because we didn't have enough time. Well, we created that problem, but it's a way for us to say to ourselves, see, I didn't fail the project, I just didn't have enough time. It's a back door to be comfortable with only giving 90% or 80%. It's an excuse. It's a built-in excuse we create at the beginning of something to let ourselves off the hook from not doing our best. Or even better, really more accurately, we're letting ourselves off the hook from our fear that we will fail, that we can't do our best no matter how hard we try. So it's a back door that helps us not face this truth about ourselves, about our own fear, about our abilities. So ownership also means taking a risk. It means taking the risk of being vulnerable to failure. What happens if I really own this and I do my best and it still fails, or the boss doesn't think it's enough, or I don't succeed with my goal? I actually fail miserably. That's scary. It's terrifying. And yes, failure is excruciating. But you know what happens when we're owners and we fail? We own our failure. And owning our failure means finding what's in that failure that we can learn from and grow from and move forward with as a better and stronger person. Talk to anybody who succeeded. They're going to tell you they learned far more from their failures from their successes, because failure may be the very thing that propelled them to get to the success that they're achieving now. And they look like a big success, and they are, but you're just not seeing what went into it. Being an owner means we're taking full responsibility for something. There's no back doors, and we're facing whatever risks there are. It's a brave, courageous thing to do to be an owner. I have a good friend who kind of shifts between being Mr. Owner and Mr. Calculator. Mr. Calculator is always sort of figuring out the angles, trying to see the way that's going to be the best for as many people involved, that's not going to take the risks that he might be afraid of, that's going to sort of find the easy path or a path that doesn't ruffle a lot of feathers. And when he gets into Mr. Calculator, he gets stuck because he's trying to calculate all the angles, and no one has a computer that powerful. But then if he shifts to being Mr. Owner and he says, you know what, I'm just going to do this and we're going to move forward because I believe this to be the best path, then he's in momentum. Then he's in progress. And whatever comes at him, he's dealing with because he's owning the situation. And if there are mistakes, he's in charge and he's fixing the mistakes. And by recognizing this in himself, he's transformed his life. He went from a kind of gray relationship with his girlfriend to being married. He built a family. He bought a house. Because he got tired of paying rent, he wanted to be an owner. Probably the biggest change was at work. He changed where he works. He didn't like the way things were going on. He felt they were out of integrity. He was continually asked to put out fires and to create miracles at the last minute, and he was rewarded for being that kind of miracle worker. But he realized his job was pretty much just taking out the garbage so that nobody else could see that it stunk. And he moved on to a job that was in integrity, where his skills could be used proactively to create a better world for everybody there, to help fulfill the goals of the organization directly rather than just sort of cleaning up the mess in the back. That man became a full owner. He'll slip into Mr. Calculator because all of us will backslide from time to time. But he realizes that's when he needs to call on Mr. Owner and be in charge of his life. One of the things that's probably keeping many of us the smallest is our relationship with money. So if that's the case, then the opposite may be true. As we improve our relationship with money, we're going to be able to live a bigger, better life. What's the core problem with our relationship with money? Is our blindness, our ignorance, the way we're hiding it away or feeling like it's evil or bad or dirty, or stories that we have about people who have money. If you want to live an ascetic life, if you want to live the simplest, less materialistic life, great. Calculate exactly what you need to do that. Where do you need to live? What do you need to do? Do you need to grow your own vegetables? And then start shifting your life to live that way. But if you're constantly blaming society and materialism and capitalism, as evil as they may be in parts and at times, you're using those forces and excuse to stay stuck. Now, like anything when we feel fear, we try and hide from it because we are terrified of what may result. What would happen if you looked at your money and admitted it's not enough, and that month after month you're struggling to pay your bills and you're fighting it? You might have to admit you need to change. You need to do something different. You need to cut expenses. You need to find a second job or some way to have a little bit of a side hustle or whatever it takes. You may not be able to take the frustration and anger that comes from seeing yourself trapped in a financial situation and feeling like you don't have options. And you're going to keep feeling that way until you actually sit down and ask yourself, what is possible here? And am I willing to make the changes necessary to make that difference? That's a hard place to be, particularly around money. But it's the only way we're really going to change our lives, change our attitudes. Stop feeling small and limited and start looking at what's possible, what we can do, what we can accomplish in our lives. Some of us may be living dependent lives. We depend on a spouse or a mother or a father or a brother to give us the money we live on. If we really want to change our relationship with money, we have to ask ourselves, how much longer do I want to be a dependent man or woman? 2 years, 1 year, 6 months? What's our date of liberation? 4 months, say? Okay, that's an ownership statement. I want to change this relationship. Now you have 4 months to start creating a plan that will start changing it. Now with money, like with anything else in our life that we're trying to change, like our terms or our ownership, we may feel defeated before we even start. How will I ever become independent from the money my father gives me? How will I ever have enough money in my bank account so that I can make it to the end of the month? Well, that's a big problem, and the solution to every big problem starts with baby steps. What are the baby steps you can do today to change your relationship? What's your plan to reach your day of liberation? Who's available to help you reach that day? Who can you ask for help to do something a little bit different? Because we all know we get stuck the most when we try and go it alone. But when we try and build community and relationship and work with others, wind flows under our wings and we start gaining speed towards our new goal. The baby steps become larger and larger, and before we know it, we're propelled forward. But it starts with the courage to say, I want, I need, I am obligated by the universe to live a different life, to do something different. There was a time in my life where I owed a significant amount on credit cards. And I was paying ridiculous interest. And I realized that my wife and I had other resources that we could use to pay off those credit cards. And in the long run, we'd be better off because we'd be saving all that interest. Yeah, it would mean a short-term hit. And it would also mean, and this was the hard part, that I would have to go to my wife and I'd have to say to her, I have a problem. And here's how I want to fix it for the health of our family. When I told her that, she was furious. And I said to her, I'm going to tear up my credit cards and I'm not going to use one until I know that I can pay it off every single month. And she was mad at me for several days. And I stood firm. I took the heat. I knew her anger was not about me as much as about the situation. And I knew that since I was owning the situation, she would come to see in time, as I held to my terms and my ownership, that I was working to change my relationship with money. And I did. Credit cards are gone. I use them now. I pay off my balance every month. We don't pay interest on any of our credit cards. I completely changed that relationship with money. And here's the other thing that happens when we change our relationship with anything. It starts creating a domino effect. And we're able to start changing other ways, other aspects as well. That decision probably led to other decisions that forced me to change careers because I was tired of under-earning. I wanted to be a better wage earner for me and for my family. And that led me to some of the most successful experiences I've had in my life, both financially and even more importantly, spiritually. Because as we grow, we start to see the benefits that creates, the power and the energy that creates in every area of our lives. Let me ask you this. Do you know your bank balance right now? How often do you look at your bank balance? Is it something like dirt under the carpet that you don't want to look at, you don't deal with until you absolutely have to pay your rent and pay your electric bill and your cell phone bill and whatever other bills you have, and then you only do it under duress, either just before all the bills are due or you're incurring all kinds of late penalties because you've put it off yet again? Again, that is not a strong ownership relationship with money. That is a resentful, hiding, backdoor relationship. It's in your blind spot. And you're so terrified of it, you don't want to bring it front and center. Let's start with one of the biggest blind spots about money. Oh, I don't need a lot of money to survive. Yeah, that may be true. Mahatma Gandhi famously lived on a diet of rice. He wanted to disavow materialism to be able to focus on what he saw as his higher purpose. And so he lived a very simple life. But he didn't live an unowned life about his money. His diet of rice was very deliberate, very clear. He owned that diet of rice. He owned the way he swore off all other materialism. Anyone who's taken a vow of poverty has made that similar ownership decision. Now, if you are living as if you've taken a vow of poverty, and money is a struggle for you every day, every week, every month, and you're telling yourself, well, it's because I don't need a lot of money. I wish we lived in a different world. I wish it wasn't materialistic and capitalistic and exploiting me and who I am as a person. Well, that's great. And a lot of that is true, but it's not the truth about your attitude towards money, your relationship towards money, because you're shifting the blame outside yourself. You're blaming the society, you're blaming materialism, you're blaming the world, you're blaming your job for not paying you enough, you're blaming your landlord because they demand rent. You're not owning your simple, basic relationship with money, which is right now you don't have enough to meet your basic needs of food, shelter, and clothing. That's not ownership in a principled position to say, I'm going to live a very limited life. That's a struggle. That's a fight. And anytime there's a struggle and a fight, you're directing energy to staying in the fight rather than to solving the problem so that you can move on and live the bigger, better life you want to live. There was a time in my life where I owed a significant amount on credit cards. And I was paying ridiculous interest. And I realized that my wife and I had other resources that we could use to pay off those credit cards. And in the long run, we'd be better off because we'd be saving all that interest. Yeah, it would mean a short-term hit. And it would also mean, and this was the hard part, is that I would have to go to my wife and I'd have to say to her, I have a problem. And here's how I want to fix it for the health of our family. When I told her that, she was furious. And I said to her, I'm going to tear up my credit cards and I'm not going to use one until I know that I can pay it off every single month. And she was mad at me for several days. And I stood firm. I took the heat. I knew her anger was not about me as much as about the situation. And I knew that since I was owning the situation, she would come to see in time, as I held to my terms and my ownership, that I was working to change my relationship with money. And I did. Credit cards are gone. I use them now. I pay off my balance every month. We don't pay interest on any of our credit cards. I completely changed that relationship with money. And here's the other thing that happens when we change our relationship with anything. It starts creating a domino effect. And we're able to start changing other ways other aspects as well. That decision probably led to other decisions that forced me to change careers because I was tired of under-earning. I wanted to be a better wage earner for me and for my family. And that led me to some of the most successful experiences I've had in my life, both financially and even more importantly, spiritually. Because as we grow, we start to see the benefits that creates, the power and the energy that creates in every area of our lives. I hope you can now use the three concepts in this part, terms, ownership, and your relationship to money, to live the bigger, better life you were meant to live. As you implement these ideas, as you stand for your terms, as you stand as an owner, and as you start to see changes in your relationship with money, you will start telling different stories to yourself. You will take new steps forward, and very quickly they will build on each other exponentially. If you've watched the other parts of this class, part 1, freeing yourself to live your bigger, better life, and part 2, the power of context, faith, and gratitude to rewrite our stories, you'll see all these new ideas combined. If you haven't watched them yet, go ahead and check them out. I want to remind you, you have the power to change these stories and change your sense of your size in the world. Today can be your day of liberation. All you've got to do is choose it and then start working on the small steps I've talked about that will help you. Leave comments in the discussion thread and I'll check back to answer them. And post your projects in the project gallery. What are your old stories and what are your new stories now? Tell us about them and build your community. That's the best way to make the fastest progress. Thanks for watching, and I hope you've learned some ideas that will really move you forward. It's been great presenting this class, and I'll see you in the next one.